What if I told you that a former U.S. president's family peanut farm was so successful it created a major political scandal? But the real story isn't about the money. It's about the innovative farming techniques that helped build the character of America's most humble president. Jimmy Carter's 360-acre operation in Plains, Georgia, holds lessons about American agriculture, family values, and the kind of hard work that built this nation. The Carter family legacy that built character. Long before Jimmy Carter ever thought about politics, the Carter family was building something special in the red clay soil of southwest Georgia. What started as Earl Carter's peanut and cotton operation in the 1920s became the foundation for values that would later shape a presidency. Earl Carter wasn't just farming, he was teaching his son lessons about innovation, hard work, and treating people fairly that would define Jimmy's entire life. When young Jimmy returned from the Navy in 1953, the family operation was generating substantial income for rural Georgia, but more importantly, it was operating on principles that were ahead of their time. Earl had built relationships with local African American farmers, sharing equipment and knowledge when segregation made such cooperation rare. The operation included not just the family's 360 acres, but Earl's general store, warehouse, and various business interests that made the Carters one of the more prosperous families in Sumter County. But here's what most people don't realize about Earl Carter's operation. He was quietly revolutionizing how business was done in rural Georgia. While other white landowners maintained strict racial barriers, Earl was lending money to black farmers, selling them supplies on credit, and even sharing his modern equipment during harvest season. This wasn't just good business. It was building the foundation for the integrated community that would later support Jimmy's political career. The Carter General Store became a gathering place where farmers of all backgrounds could discuss crops, weather, and market prices. Earl kept detailed records of every transaction, every loan, and every crop yield, teaching young Jimmy that success in agriculture required both hard work and careful attention to numbers. The innovative farming practices that made a difference. Jimmy Carter didn't just inherit a farm. He inherited his father's belief that farming could always be improved through careful observation and experimentation. The Carter operation was among the early adopters in Georgia of crop rotation systems that maintained soil health while maximizing yields. They rotated peanuts with cotton and corn in carefully planned cycles, understanding that peanuts, as legumes, could actually improve soil fertility for the next crop. Carter was meticulous about record keeping, tracking which fields performed best under different conditions and adjusting his planting strategies accordingly. What made Carter different from many farmers was his willingness to try new varieties and techniques recommended by agricultural extension agents. He attended farming seminars, read agricultural journals, and wasn't afraid to experiment with new fertilizers or planting methods if they showed promise. This scientific approach to farming was less common in the 1950s and 60s, when many farmers relied primarily on traditional methods passed down through generations. Carter's approach to soil management was particularly innovative for its time. He understood that Georgia's red clay soil could be both a blessing and a curse. Rich in nutrients, but prone to compaction and erosion if not managed properly, he implemented contour plowing techniques that followed the natural curves of the land, preventing soil erosion during heavy rains. Carter also experimented with cover crops, planting winter rye and crimson clover between growing seasons to protect and enrich the soil. These practices, now standard in sustainable agriculture, were considered progressive in the 1950s. He kept detailed pH records for different sections of his fields, applying lime when needed to maintain optimal growing conditions. Carter even built terraces on sloping fields to prevent erosion, an investment that paid dividends for decades. His neighbors began copying his methods when they saw his consistently higher yields, and local extension agents would bring visiting farmers to see the Carter operation as an example of modern farming techniques. The Carter Warehouse and Processing Operation. The real heart of the Carter operation was Carter Warehouse, a peanut buying and processing facility that served not just the Carter farm, but dozens of other local farmers. This wasn't just about the Carter family's crops. It was about creating a business that helped the entire community. The warehouse could clean, sort, and store thousands of pounds of peanuts, allowing farmers to get better prices by selling when market conditions were favorable rather than dumping everything at harvest time. Carter learned every aspect of the business, from grading peanuts to understanding commodity markets, skills that would serve him well in later business and political dealings. The operation required understanding complex logistics, coordinating with truckers, managing storage, and maintaining relationships with buyers from major food companies. By the 1970s, Carter Warehouse was one of the more successful agricultural businesses in southwest Georgia, generating enough income to allow Carter to consider a career in politics. The warehouse operation taught Carter lessons about leadership and fairness that would define his presidency. During harvest season, farmers would line up with their trucks full of peanuts, waiting to have their crops weighed, graded, and purchased. Carter insisted on treating every farmer fairly, regardless of the size of their operation or their race, a policy that wasn't universal in 1960s Georgia. He paid the same prices to black farmers as white farmers, and he was known for his honest grading practices. If a farmer disagreed with the grade assigned to their peanuts, Carter would personally re-examine the crop and explain his decision. This attention to fairness and detail built trust throughout the community and established Carter's reputation as someone who could be counted on to do the right thing. The warehouse also served as an informal community center where farmers would gather to discuss everything from weather patterns to local politics, giving Carter insights into the concerns and needs of rural Georgians that would prove invaluable in his political career. The science behind successful peanut farming. To understand why the Carter operation was so successful, you need to understand the unique challenges of growing peanuts in Georgia's climate and soil. Peanuts are unlike most crops. They flower above ground, but produce their nuts underground, requiring specific soil conditions and careful timing throughout the growing season. Carter mastered the delicate balance of moisture, temperature, and soil preparation that peanut farming demands. He learned that peanuts needed well-drained soil but consistent moisture during the growing season, a challenge in Georgia's unpredictable climate. Carter invested in irrigation systems when most farmers still relied entirely on rainfall, giving him a crucial advantage during dry years. He also understood the importance of proper curing after harvest. Peanuts must be dried to exactly the right moisture content to prevent spoilage and maintain quality. The Carter farm's success also came from understanding the economics of peanut farming. Peanuts were subject to federal allotment programs that limited how many acres each farmer could plant, making efficiency crucial. Carter maximized his yields through careful seed selection, optimal planting dates, and precise fertilizer application. He studied weather patterns and soil temperatures to determine the best planting windows, often starting earlier or later than his neighbors based on conditions in specific fields. Carter also understood the different markets for peanuts. Some varieties were better for oil production, others for eating, and still others for seed. He planted different varieties in different fields based on soil conditions and market demands, maximizing his income from every acre. This attention to detail and market awareness helped the Carter operation consistently outperform neighboring farms, building the financial foundation that would later support his political ambitions. The political dilemma that changed everything. When Jimmy Carter decided to run for president, his successful farming operation became both an asset and a liability. On one hand, it demonstrated his business acumen and connection to rural America. On the other hand, it raised questions about potential conflicts of interest if he became president. The solution was to place the farm in a blind trust, essentially, though, giving up control of the business that had been his life's work for over 2 decades. This wasn't an easy decision. The farm represented not just financial security, but family heritage and personal identity. While Carter was in the White House, the farm faced challenges from poor management and difficult economic conditions affecting agriculture nationwide. The late 1970s were tough years for farmers, with high interest rates and volatile commodity prices. By the time Carter left office in 1981, the farm had accumulated significant debt, and the former president faced the prospect of losing the family operation that had meant so much to him. The blind trust arrangement was more complicated than most people realized. Carter couldn't receive any information about the farm's operations or financial condition while he was president, meaning he had to watch from afar as the business he'd built faced unprecedented challenges. The late 1970s brought a perfect storm of problems for American agriculture. Drought in some regions, floods in others, and economic policies that made farming increasingly difficult. Interest rates soared above 20%, making it nearly impossible for farmers to finance their operations. Commodity prices fluctuated wildly, and many family farms across the country were forced into bankruptcy. The Carter farm, managed by trustees who lacked Jimmy's intimate knowledge of the operation, struggled to adapt to these changing conditions. Equipment broke down and wasn't properly maintained, crop rotations were disrupted, and relationships with longtime customers were strained. The irony wasn't lost on Carter. While he was trying to help American farmers through federal policy, his own family farm was struggling to survive. The humble return to Plains. What happened after Carter left the presidency tells us everything about his character. Rather than cashing in on his fame with lucrative speaking engagements or corporate boards, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter returned to Plains and got back to work. They didn't rebuild a massive farming empire. Instead, they focused on what mattered most to them: family, community, and service. Carter taught Sunday school at Maranatha Baptist Church, wrote books, and began the humanitarian work that would define his post-presidency. The farm remained important to him, but it became part of a simpler life focused on the values that had always guided him. He continued to stay involved in agricultural issues, supporting programs that helped small farmers and promoting sustainable farming practices. The Carter farm became a symbol of something uniquely American: the idea that success isn't just about accumulating wealth, but about using your talents and opportunities to serve others. The return to Plains wasn't easy financially. The farm's debts had to be addressed, and Carter faced the possibility of losing the land that had been in his family for generations. But rather than declare bankruptcy or sell out to developers, Carter and Rosalind rolled up their sleeves and went back to basics. They downsized the operation, focusing on the most productive fields and eliminating unprofitable activities. Carter returned to the hands-on management style that had made the farm successful in the first place, personally overseeing planting and harvest operations. He renegotiated debts, rebuilt relationships with suppliers and customers, and gradually restored the farm's profitability. The experience taught him valuable lessons about resilience and humility that would inform his humanitarian work in the decades to come. Carter often said that returning to the farm after the presidency reminded him of what was truly important in life: family, community, and honest work. The agricultural legacy that continues today. The real legacy of Jimmy Carter's farming experience isn't found in any specific technique or innovation. It's in the approach to life and work that farming taught him. The patience required to plant crops and wait for harvest, the humility that comes from depending on weather and market forces beyond your control, and the satisfaction of honest work well done, these lessons shaped everything Carter did afterward. His farming background gave him credibility with rural voters and an understanding of agricultural policy that served him well as governor and president. Today, the Carter Farm is part of the Jimmy Carter National Historical Park, where visitors can learn about the agricultural heritage that shaped the president, the lessons from those Georgia fields about hard work, innovation, treating people fairly, and staying connected to the land remain as relevant today as they were when young Jimmy Carter was learning them from his father. The Carter Farm's influence on modern agriculture extends beyond its historical significance. Many of the sustainable farming practices Carter pioneered, crop rotation, soil conservation, integrated pest management, are now standard recommendations from agricultural extension services across the country. His approach to community-based agriculture, where successful farmers help their neighbors improve their operations, has become a model for rural development programs worldwide. The Carter Center's agricultural initiatives in developing countries draw directly from lessons learned on the family farm in Plains, Georgia. Carter's understanding that farming is about more than just producing crops, that it's about building communities, preserving the environment, and maintaining a way of life, continues to influence agricultural policy and practice today. The enduring lessons from Plains, Georgia. Perhaps the most important lesson from Jimmy Carter's farming experience is that success in agriculture, like success in life, comes from treating people fairly, working hard, and never forgetting where you came from. The values Carter learned on the farm, integrity, perseverance, and service to others, guided him through a presidency, a post-presidential career devoted to humanitarian causes, and a marriage that has lasted more than 75 years. The farm taught him that leadership isn't about commanding from above, but about working alongside others toward common goals. It showed him that true prosperity comes not from accumulating wealth, but from building something that benefits the entire community. The Carter Farm story also reminds us of agriculture's central role in American democracy. The founders envisioned a nation of independent farmers who would be the backbone of democratic society, and Carter embodied that ideal. His farming experience gave him an understanding of rural America that informed his policies on everything from energy to foreign relations. He knew that farmers were not just producers of food and fiber, but stewards of the land and pillars of their communities. This understanding shaped his approach to environmental policy, his support for renewable energy, and his belief that America's strength came from its connection to the land and its commitment to treating all people with dignity and respect. Jimmy Carter's Peanut Farm shows us that true success comes not from the size of your operation, but from the values you bring to your work and the character you build along the way. From innovative farming to humble service, this Georgia farm shaped a president and reminds us what's best about American agriculture. Subscribe for more stories about the farms and farmers that built America, and check out the next video on your screen about another fascinating agricultural story